Jessica, how do I love thee? Let me count the waves. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 4,000.
Why don't you just leave the letter there?
Hello, everybody. It's a Tuesday night. Yes, it is Tuesday night, and we're sitting here together, Jessica and I, ready for another episode of It's a Classic, the podcast where Gen Z versus Gen X, and the movies that I grew up with to see if they truly are a classic. And this week, we've got a big one this week because it was one of the biggest movies of the year it came out. It's also considered, in at last estimate, the most expensive movie that came out in the 80s.
$70 million.
$70 million.
Translating to nearly $150 million today.
Yes. And that movie is Who Framed Roger Rabbit? And I don't know if you expected us to talk about this, but I think we said we were. Did we say we were doing it? Okay. So we said we were doing it. And so, Jessica, had you heard of this movie before?
Absolutely. I mean, I share a name with one of the characters.
Well, yes,
so.
yes. But I mean, had you really understood what it was before you saw it?
A little bit. I knew that there was a funny rabbit guy, and I knew that it was one that my parents always talked about. Were like, "You're too young to see that movie yet."
Well, when you were little, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because it's rated PG, but it does have.
I'm surprised with how much it got away with.
Well, there's a little bit. It's not nearly as risque as you're led to believe. There was actually a movie that came out a few years later called Cool World, which kind of had a premise of a animator who gets into his own creations, this comic he drew, and the girl seduces him. So you have a live character in a cartoon who is there's it was
Gross.
Weird. Yeah, it was kind of creepy. So while this presented itself as potentially something like that, it truly comes out to be a little more benign. And though really the PG rating, I would say pushing it is just how freaky and scary the bad guy is.
So scary. Oh my gosh, he's terrifying.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get into this. This movie came out in 1988. It is a directorial effort by Robert Zemeckis, who you would know from Back to the Future.
Oh!
Robert Zemeckis directed Back to the Future. In fact, if I am correct in my order, Back to the Future was the movie he had done just before Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He had done a couple of episodes of Amazing Stories, but he jumped into this movie, which technologically is one of the biggest groundbreaking achievements in animation at the time. I know there have been many, many more, and a lot of movies have taken the cues from it, like Space Jam and others. But when you think back to 1988, the idea that live characters would inhabit a movie with cartoon characters, and not just cartoon characters.
Some of the cartoon
characters. Like famous cartoon characters.
Mickey and Bugs Bunny in the same scene.
Did that surprise you?
Yes.
Okay. So
I was like, oh, I'm just going to see a few random ones, and I saw the Three Pigs, and I was like, oh, that's as good as it's gonna get.
Yeah.
This is how crazy.
And then it just keeps going and keeps going.
They're both on screen, and I'm like, what in the world?
Well, and this movie was made by Touchstone Pictures, which was a division of Disney. Disney owned Touchstone. And we'll get to a little bit about that Disney, or about that Mickey, Bugs Bunny, that whole thing, because that's important. Why that they show up on screen together. So, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? It's based on a book called Who Censored Roger Rabbit,
which is completely dark,
and not at all what this is.
Wow.
The premise of the movie is that the cartoons that we grew up with, that our grandparents grew up with in the 40s, were all produced through studios, obviously, but that instead of being drawn, these are actual living characters. Now,
real.
They operate within the physics and the rules of cartoons, so it's very difficult to kill them.
They don't die.
They don't die. They can have stuff dropped on their head. There is a way to die.
Yes,
but we'll get to that. And in this movie, you have Eddie Valiant, who is a private detective who used to be kind of the private detective to the Toons. to Toontown. They loved him. But then there was an accident. Well, not an accident. There was a case where his brother, who was his partner, got killed by a Toon.
Yes.
And we know that Toon had a real high squeaky voice. And so Eddie's brought in to investigate what's going on with Roger Rabbit, one of the maroon cartoon stars.
Yes.
Who's blowing his lines. And
he's very goofy and funny. And,
he's that kind of he's really a kind of a mix of Mickey, Bugs, and Daffy. You know, he's all kind of thrown together.
He's got the voice
of goofy,
Mickey, but he's kind of just airheaded.
Yeah. And so Roger's having some issues, and so they want to do an investigation. They think it leads back to Roger's wife, Jessica Rabbit.
Yes.
And in the big twist at the time was that Jessica Rabbit is not a rabbit. She is the femme fatale bombshell, the over-exaggerated, in every possible way, beauty, seductress kind of character. Interestingly enough, Bob Hoskins, who played Eddie Valiant, when he was filming, obviously there's nobody in front of him.
Yeah.
They said, what does Jessica Rabbit look like? And they said, picture the sexiest woman you could in the whole world. And when the movie came out, he goes, that is way further than what I thought.
Oh my gosh.
He goes, that was way more risque than what I pictured in my head. So anyway, there's a whole conspiracy, and we won't necessarily have to get into the whole thing, but basically what it boils down to is somebody's buying up all the property in Los Angeles and Hollywood. The next thing that's up on the docket is Toontown. Somebody's trying to buy Toontown, but there's a will that Acme, Marvin Acme, who owns Acme, exactly what you think it is. He has the deed to Toontown, and they all love him. And they all love him. And in his will, he was going to hand off Toontown to the Toons when he passes away. However, there is a little side thing that he might be having a little bit of a fling with Jessica. And which is a little weird. They play a little patty cake. The most uncomfortable scene I've had to sit through with my dad. Yeah, by the way, Romance in the Toontown is playing patty cake, which I thought was one of the most hilarious things. And I almost cried. You almost cried. But there's this whole big mystery, and in the meantime, there's this character, the Judge, played by Christopher... I want to say Christopher Lloyd. Christopher Lloyd. How could I get my Christophers mixed up? Christopher Lloyd, not Christopher Walken, which I wanted to say. Who's Doc Brown? Yes. His character doesn't blink at all on screen. I did know that. Yeah. He does not blink because well, we're not going to give it away, because if you've never seen this movie and you're maybe Jessica's age and you've never seen this movie, we don't want to give away too much of the plot. However, we'll give a little bit away. It was to make him scary. Yeah, it was to make him scary. Judge Doom, which is a great name. Judge Doom. Love that, yeah. So anyway, Judge Doom wants, you find out he's after Toontown. He wants to take it over, and he's also created this thing called the Dip. Which is... So it is a mixture. I'm trying to find it. I just had it up. It's like turpentine. And it is... Where did it go? It's anything that can erase art. Yes, basically. And it's actually a real thing that animators would use to help erase... I can't find it anymore. But it was a mixture of like turpentine, acetone, and something else. Oh, okay. And it's legitimately something that they would use to fix cartoons whenever they would mess them up. Yep. But this is used as more of like as an execution for Toons. And it's, again, the first nightmare sequence is that cute little shoe who gets dipped into the dip. The same person who voices Bart Simpson. Oh, was it? Yes. Okay. This shoe is, that's, Yeah, that's awesome. So back to this movie. There's a lot of back and forth with, crazy cartoon little inside jokes and one-liners, and it's really it's cute at the same time. There's a little bit of an edge to it. It's kind of unsettling. It's a little bit weird. Unsettling. Yeah. Interestingly, when they test screened this, their main test screen audiences were 18 and 19 years old, and every one of them hated it. Absolutely hated this movie. I can see that. And they not that I hate this movie, but I'm like, I can tell why. Yeah, and almost the entire audience walked out, and Robert Zemeckis says, we're not changing a thing in this movie. Huh. So what the movie you saw we see is the movie he wanted. There were some conditions for the animators that they had to do, that they had to have the camera move during the action so that they didn't look like the characters were just drawn on the screen and flat. It wasn't a flat screen. They had to interact physically with as many things as they possibly could. Interesting. And they had to use shadows and light in a way that had never been done. In fact, Oh, go ahead.
And that's crazy to think about because there are over 140 characters.
I know, 140
in this
characters.
movie, and every single one of them is doing something.
Yep, they all interact with stuff. There's the scene, you immediately spotted it when Roger's handcuffed to Eddie, and you're like, okay, how did they do that? And there's a great making of where you get to see all the things that they had to do. There is an actual kind of a phrase that has now been coined.
Bumping the lamp.
Bumping the lamp. Why?
I did not read that.
You didn't read it? So bumping the
lamp. I saw
lamp.
it, but
So bumping the lamp was the scene where Eddie's handcuffed to Roger and they're in his kitchen. They hit the lamp on the ceiling. They hit the light and it starts swinging. And it was so complex in getting the shadows right. That's bumping the lamp because it's something that is very challenging but complex to do. And so when you hear about bumping the lamp, look that up because it comes from Roger Rabbit. And
I'm looking at it right now.
You're looking at it right now.
Hold up.
Yeah, bump the lamp is a term used by Disney employees to refer to going the extra mile on an effect
that some people won't even notice.
Because I've never noticed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, it's funny because, like I said, the humor, you've got Baby Herman, who is a cute little baby who's 50 years old. He
cusses like a sailor.
He cusses like a sailor, smokes cigars, and he's a womanizer.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of original characters, like Eddie's animated pistol with all of his bullets, and they're all different Wild West characters. But let's get to the fact that there are legitimately known properties in this movie. So you saw the Three Pigs.
Which is one of my favorite, classic comic strips and cartoons, and I freaked out when I saw them. I was like, "Oh my gosh, there they are!"
You've got the hippos.
Yes, you got the hippos. You have the brooms from Fantasia.
Yeah, they come out. The pelican. Here's the interesting thing about the pelican, and I can't remember if he's from any Disney or Warner Brothers, who are the two companies that are involved with their characters. But he rides his bike out and he crashes it. You know why he crashed it?
Why?
Because it was too hard for them to get the bike to stay upright, so they just rolled it. And when it crashed, they had him crash.
That's so cute.
So, I mean, there were things like that they had to do on the fly. So you've got, all the main characters, Bugs Bunny, Mickey Mouse.
We have Tweety Bird in there.
Tweety Bird.
Donald and Daffy have a little, fight in a bar.
And it's in the piano bar.
And
they have a competition. That's when he first sees Jessica Rabbit. You have, and at the end, of course, you have this big cascade of characters at the end. Here's the deal about Mickey and Bugs and Donald and Daffy. Warner Brothers would only allow certain characters to be used.
Yeah.
And they had to have as much screen time as Mickey
as
Disney characters. So what they did was they paired them up.
That's tea.
So that was the easiest way to keep it, to make sure that they had the most amount of, the equal amount of time.
That's actually really interesting.
Yeah.
So you have to keep them.
You got to keep them. So they paired them together. So they had to be together in order to be on screen equal amount of time. Now that doesn't mean there's not other characters in there, because you have Tweety Bird, like you said. You've got Porky Pig. You've got Yosemite Sam.
Yes, he comes flying out of the air at one point.
Well, did you notice that Eddie's gun was given to him by Yosemite Sam? Yeah. So there's all these little relationships in there that are really funny. This is a detective. It's a noir, hard-boiled detective kind of story, and so.
But imagine one of the a really hard
Well, it's not like dark,
but
dark.
doused in color.
But I mean when I mean dark, that film noir idea that. The seedy underbelly of Hollywood, which some of that's there. You've got the gangster weasels, that kind of thing. There's organized crime and whatnot, but there's that cartoon element. I love the part where they go to Toontown, because it's
sunshine and
but all the rules of cartoons, like the crazy girl that looks like Jessica Rabbit that's trying to get Eddie to kiss her, and he does the whole thing where he picks up the road stripes and aims it at a wall, and he's like, "Toons, get him every time." And then Toons cannot resist shaving a haircut.
The Toon.
2 bits, you knock on it, and they can't resist. They have to answer it, and so you got those cool rules like that. And so I remember seeing this I would think I was at my. We were up in Minnesota with my cousins when we went and saw this movie. I believe. So I do remember my Uncle Gary he did a pretty good imitation of Roger.
That's funny.
But Charles Fleischman, who played Roger Rabbit, he would actually do his lines off screen in a bunny costume.
Yeah, he would dress up like.
Yeah. But then when he was walking around the studio, all the other people involved at the studio who weren't part of the movie would look and go, "Man, the effects on that Rabbit movie are terrible," but not realizing what was happening. So,
yeah.
So, what do you think? Do you think this is a kind of movie that is more one of those things that's stuck in time?
I think so, because it takes the classics and it puts it in there. Now, I was just thinking about this a few minutes earlier, thinking about the fact that there is the classic Disney comics and the strips and the movies, and I like Snow White. Isn't she in there at one point at the end?
I think she comes in at that big group shot.
Yeah.
But
it was funny looking at that group shot. I don't know if you paused it or not. I can't remember if we did, but
we didn't pause it. But if you do, there's a lot of
we
people
just sat there and pointed all the ones.
Yeah.
There's who.
Well, and when I say stuck in time, it's the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Do you think this movie is more of, it's kind of like in that Footloose genre or Footloose cabinet, shelf of
Drawer.
These are movies that are just really a sliver of that time?
Yes, it's.
You really think so?
Actually, I don't, because I think this is a story that it does a good job of being able to be told again.
Well, yeah, and when you watch it, it doesn't. You know how things, effects and stuff deteriorate or they don't hold up. I think this actually does.
Yes, it does, and all the things in this movie are fantastic. It's got its silly moments, but you look at it and you go, "This is insane."
Well, the silliness is pretty smart, right?
Yeah,
because. Roger, his whole thing is just to be ridiculous, and
off the charts,
there are some things he does in this movie that are absolutely hysterical.
Yeah.
But the idea that Toon's purpose is to make people smile, make people laugh, and without that, they don't have that purpose. And even when you find out spoiler alert, we find out that our ultimate bad guy actually is a Toon in disguise.
Yes.
And the shock of a Toon who's gone bad, right?
Yeah.
With the exception, you got the weasels who are bad, but of course they die laughing.
Yeah.
Which I thought is
funny.
don't you remember what happened to the hyenas?
Oh, did they say that?
Yeah.
That's
but this
really
was well
funny.
before Lion King. But, I remember watching it and just sitting there kind of being blown away. I think everybody was. We were blown away by that. Now, granted, these days, you see that kind of stuff all the time. Space Jam, or which we mentioned before, there are other movies that have animated elements and, interactions like that. But
I don't think anyone is going to be able to do it as well as this one. Because
you don't think so?
I don't, because it all feels natural, and I feel like people after us are going to try to recreate that, and they can't, because this was so new.
Yeah.
And it was the first time, and everything looks so good. And you have to have that kind of, I don't know, there's a way it visibly looks.
Well, I think that goes back to the bump the lamp thing.
Yeah.
Because everything's so easily done with computers now.
And doesn't have
that was engineering.
Hand drawn
yeah,
attention.
because every frame had to be treated as a still picture. Every frame of this movie that had an animated character in it had to be treated as a still picture that they would paint.
Yeah.
And then retake the shot like they would do an animation cell. So think about that. 35 millimeter, I forget what the ratio is of frames to film. It's ridiculous. And you think how long it took people to paint that, draw that, and do the animation cells.
Yeah.
Then make sure everything's in the right place. And it's nuts.
Blows my
mind.
It
really is. So, I think from that perspective, it does. I would agree with you. It's the top of the game in terms of. And
there were so many people who worked on it. I just read it had a 10-minute ending credits because
it was one of the longest credits ever.
Insane.
That was
over 800 people worked on it.
And you think about how many people went into this, but it did win awards. It won Oscars for best effects, best sound effects. It was nominated for a lot of those technical ones. It won the Saturn Awards, which are part of one of the science fiction, conventions and communities. It won Best Picture. You've got Bob Hoskins playing Eddie Valiant. Bob Hoskins, amazing actor.
Which he actually got beat out by, he won over Harrison Ford Chevy Chase and Bill Murray.
But here's the Bill Murray one.
He didn't get the call.
Yeah, Bill Murray. Now, Bill Murray is notorious about like being difficult to contact. He's got an answering machine service at the time that you could contact him. Producers would call, but you never knew if he was going to call you back. And so he never called back. And later on found out in an interview with Bob Zemeckis that he had been up for the part, and he was upset. He was upset. He was like, I would have taken that in an instant. But that kind of tells you about that strange like Bill Murray kind of thing. You know, he's a quirky dude. But you had all these famous actors. Kathleen Turner was the voice of Jessica Rabbit. Kathleen Turner, if you don't know who that she was kind of like the top femme fatale of the 80s. Yeah. She'd been in all these movies, but she'd been in a movie for Robert Zemeckis called Romancing the Stone, which is a great movie.
I feel like I've seen that.
I don't know if you have. It's got Michael Douglas. Hilarious movie. Romancing the Stone, and then she went on to do a lot of others, but she was the voice, but Amy Irving was the singing voice for Jessica Rabbit. And I think Irving's the only one credited. But you had Mel Blanc, you had all the classic voices coming back to do them. Bugs Bunny and Daffy, those were the classic voice actors. The guys who created this. And so it really is, not only is it a cool story, it really is a tribute movie in a way. Because you kind of feel like, and really honestly, if you think back, this was kind of the last time we had these characters with the original voices, right?
Yeah.
Maybe some
everyone did Betty have her original character?
That was actually Betty Boop's original character's voice.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that was her. She had retired that voice and then went on to do Olive Oil and Popeye, but that was her.
Oh yeah, that's right. They were gonna have him in the movie.
They were, yeah.
They were, but they couldn't get him.
Yeah, that's true.
Couldn't sign him.
Couldn't sign him. And there's a lot of that. It's like, oh, we're going to have this guy. Oh, we got to replace him.
And they were going to have one of the birds. Oh, it's Donald's friends. They're at Disney. And you can ride the ride and see them, and they're chasing Donald. I don't know. One of the birds from those was going to be in there.
Okay. Yeah, you'll have to. I can't remember. You'll have to help me out with that. So. But overall, highly recommended movie. It's one of these movies that's like, there's nothing really shocking about it. There's nothing like really over the top, like, oh, this is ridiculous.
Minus, spoiler, Judge Doom getting flattened by a steamroller.
That is true. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Flopping up like one of those fishes you used to get at like a Chinese restaurant where you put it in your hand.
Stanley. He's just flat Stanley. That's all he is. Yeah, that was true. Judge Doom
scared the daylights out of me.
Try to imagine being like 8 years old. I was older than.
And then he gets reinflated.
Yeah, he reinflates himself with a helium tank. But he gets run over by a steamroller because he gets into the Acme glue. Yeah. And throws a punch and it sticks to the steamroller that's coming at him. But
and doesn't his face melt off?
He gets dipped. He doesn't know his face is a disguise. He gets dipped. You never actually see what he looks like for real.
Yeah,
because he's in disguise as Judge Doom. You do see his eyes, which are crazy eyes, and his high pitched voice, but you never actually see him outside of the Doom costume. Other than those things, but he does. Yeah, you basically get a guy run over by a steamroller, which is definitely one of those things where you're like, okay, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But and it is one of those movies. It's so cool and so groundbreaking and such a benchmark that you kind of go, okay, you compare it to something like we've already done, like One Crazy Summer. Well, One Crazy Summer, you can talk forever about how ridiculous it is.
Yeah.
There's not a lot you can say about Roger Rabbit other than, wow. I mean, this was a turning point for
ridiculous,
things.
But it's also like you watch it and I think you're like, oh my gosh, this is incredible.
Yeah,
like just I like it a lot.
Yeah, you like it a lot. All right, well, I think that makes sense that we should put our vote on it. Roger Rabbit, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Do you believe that it is a classic?
I do.
Okay, do you believe that it would translate well to your generation?
I think it would.
You think it would? All right. I agree. It's classic. It's got some of my favorite cartoon characters. I love the Warner Brothers stuff, but it's a short episode tonight just because it's such a good movie. I mean,
there's
it's
not much
like a movie that we...
And you can't, it's so transparent with the plot. You're like, there's no hidden, themes.
It's just
ridiculous.
A funny movie. It's just a fun movie. It's one you can go and you can enjoy. And the fact that we're 30 years later?
Yeah.
However long, we're still enjoying it because it's still that good of a movie. You can find it on Disney Plus. It's there. Definitely one to watch. So, all righty. Well, I thought about announcing our next movie, but I'm going to keep it a surprise.
Do I have I started watching it?
No. But I'm thinking it's time. Given that it's the month of April, I think it's important that maybe it's time to do a very, very, very specific movie.
Oh no!
So I just can't wait. It's going to be a surprise. So, hey, thank you guys for listening. We're getting a lot more people who are tuning in. So if you have any questions for us, you can check us out on Instagram. What's our Instagram handle?
It's a classic _pod.
And it's a classic _pod. You can make comments. You can tell us if we are hitting the mark or whatever. And maybe there's some movies you want us to talk about.
Of course.
But, until next time, this is Nathan.
This is Jessica.
Have a great time. Watch some movies and enjoy them.
See you later.
Bye.